The ERP Doctors with Dan Aldrich and Sam Gupta, powered by InsightJam.
Welcome back to the ERP Doctor Show, everybody. We have another action-packed show for you today. We are going to be talking to intelligent automation expert Doug Shannon in our interview spot. And as always, we will interview or go over the enterprise technology news of the week. So I am Dan Aldrich. I'm the director of Partners to Innovate. We are an ERP software consulting firm specializing in Infor Global Solutions. And I'm here with my ERP doctor partner, Sam Gupta.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dan. This is always the fun part of the week, and we have so much to unpack. Just about me, Sam Gupta, principal at Elevate IQ. Elevate IQ is the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm. Over to you, Dan, if you want to start these stories or whatever you want to cover.
I would like to just dive right in. Okay, so
right in
the stories of the week. Let me just fire it up here. Hold on one second.
Okay.
So the first one is Deloitte, who's been in the news a lot lately with their partnerships.
Yeah.
They are launching a major restructure to cut costs. So this is a really interesting one in the sense that Deloitte showing all the largest of the big four, showing all indications that they're going gangbusters and creating relationships with, say, ServiceNow and lots of big partners. But in the meanwhile, they're doing a major restructure. So they're cutting costs. And it looks like they are eliminating certain parts of their business altogether. And I think that it's freeing up more employees to work in other sections like technology that are more growing. And also it is a way to kind of play up the parts of their business that are going really well. I think that it does say in the article here that the restructuring is following a cut in their anticipated revenues. So I think that's probably maybe in the area of implementations of software, for instance, because I think it's like the big feast is coming now with a lot of people upgrading. But then after that, we're not sure, right? Is that kind of the way you interpret the article?
Yeah, so I want to touch on a couple of layers, just overall from the backstory perspective, Dan, and then we can come back and discuss this a little bit more. So number one thing overall from the macro perspective, macroeconomic guidance for consulting companies at this point of time. And I don't know, Dan, if you followed the news, Accenture, they have just indicated that their revenue guidance is not going to be as much as they hoped. So they are already cutting down on the expectation. And that's what we are hearing from major system integrators, major consulting companies. So this is going to be probably a follow-up from all of the major consulting vendors that the year is probably not going to be as bright as what we were thinking when we started 2024. So that is number one. Number two layer that we have is most of the companies are going to restructure. And I think we have been hammering this point from the get-go in these episodes that we are going to see a lot more restructuring in the companies, whether you talk about product companies or you talk about consulting companies, because of AI. AI is going to change the workflow for a lot of companies. So that is the second thing. Now, the third layer that we have, and then I don't know how much background you have about, for example, KPMG. KPMG did very similar restructuring, and in their case, that was a spin-off. And I don't know if Deloitte is going to do the spin-off as well at this point of time. The way story is reading, I think they are simply restructuring in 4 different business units. But KPMG ended up spinning off their complete consulting unit. Now this is called Bearing Point. So it's not part of the KPMG. For the most part, if you look at these consulting companies, overall, they have grown their advisory in consulting capacity a lot because that's what was making money for them. That was the higher profit margin for them. Every single accounting firm out there is trying to figure out, okay, how can I get more revenue from the consulting perspective, from the IT perspective. That's why, as of today, every single consulting company out there is looking like more of the system integrator. But when you combine all of these business units, they are inherently very, 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 very different. Sometimes you could probably have potential conflict of interest. So far, nobody has really raised the alert about that. But, all of these business units are very, very, very different. And right now, I don't know whether they are struggling. Obviously, their revenue is down, but the revenue may be down because of the macro reasons. But for the most part, there is going to be restructuring across all of the consulting companies, in my mind. So we will see a lot more consulting companies following very similar story as Deloitte. So I'm going to stop there then. And I don't have any comments.
No, right. So and the article says that the only one that you didn't mention, you mentioned Accenture and Deloitte, but the only one you didn't mention, E&Y, they didn't. They went ahead and split the consulting and the accounting, and the finance or audit parts of their business. And it sounds like, but probably not because of conflict of interest, because more for business reasons, right? Because they didn't have any situation like Arthur Andersen splitting to Accenture, right? That was a conflict of interest. But anyway, yeah, I think it's macro, as you said, in the sense that the demand has just fallen off for a lot of these. I mean, these huge ERP projects. This is a very good example. Legacy, conversion, upgrade, those kinds of projects have fallen off because the companies simply aren't investing that heavily in those where they're waiting, right? So that's probably came off their guidance in a drop in revenue, where they had to admit that the demand was falling.
Yeah, could not agree more. I think this is, I don't think this is related to Deloitte. It's a very industry-wide move, and we will see a lot more companies moving in the same direction.
Yeah, definitely software related too. Software and implementation related, because if they're not selling the ERP software, for instance, in the cloud, they're not getting their revenue from consulting work for those companies. So, okay, great. So let me move to Oracle here.
Yeah.
We talked about Oracle a little bit in the context of NVIDIA, I think, before, and their AI surge is Oracle Q3 AI surge, 40 AI deals totaling 1 billion plus, and their data center strategy. This comes from Bob Evans, Acceleration Economy, always interesting. And it sounds like they say that they have a different data center strategy than like a Microsoft does, because they're creating a bunch of small data centers as opposed to these mega ones that the others have created. But it looks like that Oracle is getting a lot of additional revenue from cloud infrastructure, cloud apps, anything related to this data center build that they're doing, including the AI. But it says in the article that it's not, although it's up quite a bit, it's really not that impressive. So it seems that maybe they're not talking about the major parts of their business in the past, right? Which would be database and applications, right? This is all got to move to the cloud, got to have AI. So a bit of hype there, I think, while maybe their core business continues to erode. I mean, in database, they continue to erode. There's a lot of other database players coming up. So what do you think about this one?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting story, and I'm actually going to touch on the last comment and then probably going to build up on that. So one of the comments that Bob, and I think Bob has written this article, right? Yes. So one of the things that Bob has mentioned, and that's kind of funny, because the market is moving at this point of time in the opposite direction. So here he's saying in final thought, Mark Benioff, recently said that Salesforce is now a data company.
Company, yeah.
Yeah. So does the data center fixation of Katz and Allison mean that Oracle is becoming a data center company? While that's not a totally serious question, the current dynamics of the market and of Oracle's disruptive place within it also means the questions also got some relevance. So now this has some very interesting layer in that question. And the reason why it has interesting layer is because if you look at, let's say, if you spoke to me then 2 years back, okay, everybody was talking about, hey, infrastructure is not the business that anybody wants to be in. Everybody was trying to move into the business application software.
Like
In
AWS,
fact,
right? Just use
well,
AWS, for example.
AWS is still very infrastructure-centric company, to be completely honest. They are not necessarily in the business apps category. Okay, the only reason why Microsoft or Oracles of the world, the only reason why they moved into the whole ERP, I mean, Microsoft was not traditionally an ERP company. Oracle was not traditionally an ERP company. They were more of the database company. Okay,
yes.
So they moved into the ERP business because they felt that if the market is controlled by these ERP companies, so we have to have piece of the pie in the ERP company, and that is going to drive the infrastructure. Because if you are simply selling the boxes, then you are not going to have much of the clout in the market. So that's why everybody wanted to move into the business application ERP-centric space. But now with AI, the market has been completely changed. Right now, in 2024, infrastructure is the hottest category. Can you believe this? Okay, that's why everybody is investing in infrastructure at this point of time. Because the way market moves then is, first thing always is going to be your infrastructure. If you don't have infrastructure, you cannot do innovation. As of today, in 2024, nobody knows how the market is going to change because of AI. That's why investing in business apps or category or whatever category we are trying to create, the investors are not certain whether they are going to have the real future or not. But one thing is certain, okay, where money is right now, that's going to be in infrastructure. That's why everybody is trying to invest in infrastructure, including Oracle. That's why Oracle is getting all of these deals. But one thing that is not clear in the story is Oracle's comparison with other companies that are getting these deals. So Oracle is great. I mean, they have $1 billion is what is quoted, as the amount. They have substantial backlog. But one thing is not clear, how much everybody else is doing. I can almost guarantee this. Okay, everybody else is probably getting far more. One company that is not highlighted in general in this whole AI game is probably Amazon. I don't know how many people are really talking about Amazon. I don't think we have touched Amazon as part of our story coverage so far. So you have Oracle, you have SAP is talking about infrastructure now. Can you believe this? So it's very interesting.
They got Auto, right? They've got proprietary database. So, they probably want to grab some infrastructure as well.
But this is going to be LLM development, right? Everybody's trying to figure out, what they are going to do with the LLM, because LLM capability is probably going to be your strategic advantage, okay? Once you have the internal capabilities from the infrastructure perspective, then you will be able to figure out, what you really want to accomplish from the business perspective. At this point of time, nobody knows what you are going to get out of it. But again, one thing is certain, that the companies that are investing in infrastructure is probably going to make money. Obviously, in the long term, the infrastructure is probably going to become commoditized, because infrastructure was never sort of the strategic advantage, right? But that will take some time for the market to pick up. As of today, the infrastructure is the hottest category.
Right. Okay. Very interesting. All right. So let's move to our buddy ServiceNow. So we've got some more acquisitions. Two acquisitions, it looks like. Acquisitions of a company called For Industry, which is in the European market in the Netherlands, specifically, and E&Y that we mentioned earlier, Smart Daily Management Application, it's called. So why don't you go ahead and offer your comments on that, and I'll jump in.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting move, and ServiceNow is probably part of every single episode that we have done, because they are making so much moves. Okay. Now, This story is very interesting as well. For the most part, what ServiceNow is doing, and we have been very consistent with our commentary, that they are moving in the CRM category, really, really heavy. And if there is going to be one company that is going to lose market share, from
Salesforce.
your exactly Salesforce, and probably Microsoft is going to be the second, because they are probably the second largest CRM vendor, I would say, if you look at the enterprise workloads. Okay. So here, this story is really interesting. Number one, the play that they are making, especially if you look at from the For Industry perspective, the whole OT space is very interesting. Okay. And OT means operational technology. Right now, as of today, the whole OT space is very fragmented. There are a lot of different vendors. There is no clear consensus in terms of the architecture. There is no clear consensus in terms of how these products are going to evolve in the future. ERP is obviously far more mature category. It has grown over the period of time from your siloed apps to very connected apps, but that is not there at this point of time in the industrial space, especially when you combine the whole OT data as well as the workflow automation piece. That's where the real power is of these workflows, because these workflows are not going to be as predictable or as standardized as your ERP category. That's why the ServiceNow is making move into that. The other layer that we have is the EY Smart Daily Management application. Now, this is the acquisition coming from their one of the partners. In this case, this is going to be E&Y. So obviously, typically, they are going to develop these applications to drive deals towards them because they are going to have this IP, and because of that, they are going to get deals. But now, ServiceNow is trying to roll that in as part of the product so that the experience is going to be far superior. This is a very common move Salesforce is doing. They all are trying to develop the industry capabilities. Workday, we just last week that they are trying to do the same thing as well. They are trying to roll a lot more industry capabilities that traditionally did not exist in these applications. And that's why we are having so many failures, problems, struggles, challenges. But now, this is going to be slightly easier once we have these industry-centric capabilities. So I'll stop there, Dan.
Yeah, so, I mean, a couple of things that piqued my interest. Obviously, I'm always looking at, we were talking, hey, they're into customer service, they're into field service, they're into employee self-service. But what they hadn't been into was manufacturing. Here they go into manufacturing, right? So because the core industry is a manufacturing technology application that's built on what they call the Now platform. So it's kind of like they've already built an application for manufacturing, including timekeeping, it looks like, maybe employee optimization on the shop floor and things like that. It was already there, so why not just purchase it, right? Rather than develop it from scratch. And the smart daily management is very, it goes with it very nicely. The capability that was already in the application from the Netherlands for industry.
Yeah, so the only comment I would make is, even though they are moving in manufacturing, but their focus is going to be more on the OT side, operational technology, not necessarily the transactional side, which is going to be your ERP. So the OT space is very fragmented. They can do a lot more things from the data perspective, from workflow perspective. So the whole MES sort of piece, that's where they are making the move, and that's the right place for them, in my mind.
That's exciting. I mean, because they're very hot, obviously. And they weren't impinging so much on manufacturing ERP systems, but it sounds like they're trying to. So
they are very smart. I don't think they are ever going to move into the ERP category. That would not be the right fit for them. But on their technology.
But applications, we talked about the composable and that sort of thing that ServiceNow can build with their developer tools, that they might move into that to put it on top and have some functionality that kind of crosses over, like you say, with an MES system, for instance. Could be very interesting to see what happens there.
It's definitely interesting.
Yes. So speaking of manufacturing and construction and all kinds of different things, we've got the next one that we have is about Acumatica. So Acumatica has rolled out new updated features in the software usability. So it's a lot of it's focused on their UI, UX, and also development tools that they have in their latest product release. So, I wanted to highlight a couple of them. Hundreds of improvements. I think it's mostly they don't mention really AI, which is refreshing in a way. So they're actually focused on functionality down in the manufacturing area. Providing the flexibility to report production operations where they run in parallel. That was something that we talked about before. They're optimizing their material requirements planning, or their MRP, and they developed a new distribution requirements planning engine to run that will plan warehouses and moves between warehouses and things like that. And some down in the financials area too. They got point of sale payment transaction processing, which is hot, using credit card readers, reading on payments, and then vacation and sick time and some things like that that are now in their new features. So it seems like a huge upgrade from what they were doing before. And I don't know whether that means that they're trying to move up market. They're traditionally SMB type software, but sounds like they might be preparing for a move up, at least into sort of mid-market.
Yeah, so very interesting story. And I think this is a follow-up of what we had covered before. So now this is slightly more detailed that they have announced, overall in terms of the capabilities. In my mind, when I look at the story, if you look at what they have done, for the most part, even though we are talking about these AI capabilities in 2024, but if you look at the cloud maturity, especially if you look at cloud ERP maturity, even in 2024, it's not there. So the points that they have mentioned are really very detailed pieces of functionality that you are going to find in richer manufacturing systems. For example, your Infor, Epic, or QAD. But these capabilities were not there in your cloud ERP, native cloud ERP systems. And cloud could mean a lot of different things, I guess, now. When you talk about the real cloud native technologies, which were sort of born in the cloud, and they are, detailing their capabilities right now. Exactly. NetSuite, Acumatica, and Sage Intacct. I don't know. I mean, if you want to call that ERP, but from the manufacturing perspective, I guess only two are probably relevant.
Yep. Okay, perfect. All right, so let's do one more here. We're running a little bit long. Let's see. How about Microsoft and NVIDIA? So we were talking a bit about NVIDIA. Now I think 3 trillion mark or something like that. Massive company. And they are making partnerships left and right, kind of like ServiceNow is doing. But they're focused on GenAI because they make the chips. And the first one is Microsoft. And they had some specifics here about Azure using a particular type of chip, Grace Blackwell here, and then having a native integration with Microsoft Fabric, it's called, for model development, and some cloud APIs also, and enhancing Copilot while they're at it. So this is now based on NVIDIA chips.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting story, and I think the other stories, and I don't know if you are going to touch over them today or not, but I mean, they all have very similar layers in them. One of the things that we are noticing is it is a very infrastructure play, to be completely honest. Right now, if you look at the public cloud companies, they don't necessarily have those capabilities from the infrastructure perspective for companies if they want to innovate or if they want to develop any sort of LLMs. They don't exist as of today, okay? So the biggest impact, I guess, of all of these capabilities are probably going to be for companies like Palantir, okay? So now these public cloud companies are going to have very similar capabilities in terms of your LLM development, in terms of your AI development. So I don't know if they are going to get a little bit of market share from them once the chips are developed. I don't know who is going to be ahead in the game. But for the most part, these cloud providers are going to get a lot more capabilities, not only for their own internal applications, but they are also going to get for their customers if they want to invest in that. I don't know how many companies can really afford to really develop the infrastructure in their backyard for LLM development. So for the most part, that revenue is going to go to your Microsofts of the world, to Oracles of the world. And that's why they are really excited to partner with NVIDIA to have that infrastructure ready. Dan.
Yeah, it's actually these 3 articles are almost identical because the terms of their partnerships are very similar to the Microsoft deal, and the other 2 are Oracle. So we talked about the building huge data centers and for AI and really increasing their revenue in the AI area. So that partnership with NVIDIA can help drive that. And the last one is SAP. So SAP and NVIDIA are doing the same sort of thing. But that SAP is with their DataSphere, their BTP, which is their business technology platform, and their RISE program, which is upgrading ECC up to S/4HANA.
Amazing. Then, do you want to go for a break or what?
I think we should go for a break. I thought you were going to add something else. You seem primed and ready. So, No
Let's go for a
problem.
break.
All right. So let's do that. Let's go to break. Welcome back, guys. We have our interview section now, and we're going to be talking to intelligent automation and AI expert Doug Shannon. So over to you, Doug.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me on the show, and happy to provide some insights. I know I was listening in to the stories that you guys were providing and talking to, and there were some points that maybe I could add or shed some light onto it, or at least like some perspective of how I see some of that going. If that's
sounds great. That sounds great. Cool. Go for it.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the stories you were talking about was, Deloitte and the Big Four and how they're restructuring. And we're seeing the market and people and industries tend to see this a lot of times when innovation comes in. And so now we have these new innovative tools, this GenAI, and people are trying to figure out how to use it. How is it being used? Where is it going? How do we use it? And really, like, how do we enable our users, our employees to be more functional and impactful with it? And so the restructuring could also be seen as a little bit as an excuse because they don't know how to use it. And a lot of times they're trying to figure it out themselves. And so instead of saying, hey, revenue may be tight, let's just do the classic move of let's just get rid of a lot of people, which I'm not a big fan of anyway. The direction I think that most business should reset that mindset is when your revenue is tight, you shouldn't be removing people. What you should be doing is taking on the thought process of it's not fire, it's just don't hire. And what I mean by that is you don't really need to fire anybody, because when you fire people or you remove people from your workforce, they're no longer going to trust that company. Not just the people you're removing, but the people that are still there are going to say, well, if they remove that person, what about me? And if something else comes along the line that is an innovation and or profits aren't where they should be, does that mean I'm going to lose my job? There's that fear. And what I mean by it's don't hire, what I mean is hire the right people. And so when your companies are feeling the crunch, this is exactly when you should be reaching out to automation teams or building in your own internal automation, driving the data analytics to say, like, what do we do and how do we do it well? So if you have people that are coming to you and your leadership teams and saying, hey, we have this new thing we want to go do, and we need to hire 10 people to go do this, don't hire 10 people. That same group and that same person coming to you should be sent off to the automation team or the GenAI team or whatever center of excellence or center of enablement you have and say, how do we do this better before we need to hire these people on? Because maybe that 10 turns into 2 or 4. And I think that's really the conversation that needs to happen in the workforce and the way that these enterprises need to realize right now in the world of 2024, authenticity is huge. And for groups and companies not being authentic, there's no place for them. And so I think that's one of the big issues.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, the focus should be on, and there is a lot of fear out there, particularly and younger workers in particular, that generation, Gen X, Gen Y, you name it, is looking very closely at, what a company shows by its actions, right? So do they respond by in a restructuring by laying off a bunch of people and using it as an excuse, maybe AI to reorganize, or do they use AI properly, keep the people they have, retrain the people, retool them to use those tools to be more efficient, right? And if some of them go out in the wash, well, that's, just the way it is, but not a concerted effort to say, okay, we're getting more runs, because what it is in the case of a Deloitte or a company like that, right? They got a lot of partners, right? That are making a lot of money, and they say, oh, we're going to have all these new tools. And it's the same in a manufacturing company with robotics and RPA and things like that. They can use it as a justification.
I mean, there's definitely bound to be individuals that will potentially lose jobs or roles. I definitely see people changing roles. And the reason why is because, or the reason why you want to enable them not to be fired, because nobody wants to be let go. But when you have somebody that's already an employee, changing them over to a different role inside the company, instead of like, say if their role totally goes away, that's fine. Let's move you to a different role that maybe you want to try something new, because not only you can say, well, that person doesn't know that role, but they know the company. And by knowing the company, they have a big leg up than if somebody brand new coming on. And they now know they're not going to be let go just because their role went away. So what that does is it enables that person to really say, oh, wait, I'm going into this new role. I can literally do the same thing. I can sit there and say, how do I do this process? What is the understanding behind it? How can I now automate that or build that into GenAI and say, I'm not going to lose, even if I lose this role, I'm not going to lose my job. I'm just going to keep on doing this. And it becomes more of a movement, and it changes the culture of that company. And people say, we can do hard things. And if it gets too hard, or it gets to a point where I'm like, well, I don't want to paint fences all day, I can actually work with the automation teams and these innovation teams in general and get it done and move on to something new, because there's always more work. And that's, again, like why you don't always just need to hire people all the time, but just hire the right ones.
Yeah. So, I'm a manufacturing and I'm an ERP guy, right? So I think in terms of my customers who are CIOs, the CFOs of manufacturing companies, considering various options and trying to figure out what to do with various tools that are coming along, what's hype, what's not. And you told me once, and we've been collaborating on LinkedIn, which is how I met you. And you said to me, I have a way to solve your ERP ills. So can you explain to me how you would do that? And if you want to draw into manufacturing, because I know you know a lot about IoT and all those sorts of things for your automation. Could you do that for me?
Yeah, I have to level it up to a point where I can get people on the same page. So GenAI comes out, right? And GenAI has the ability of doing multimodal. We all know most of this now. Where people are stuck on is it's a chatbot, right? It's a chatbot. We talk to it, and yes, we can. Some people are still stuck on the fact that you're supposed to do prompt engineering. You could, certain teams should focus on some prompt engineering, especially right now. But in the future, I mean, these things are being coded and developed using the English language. So anybody is a developer. So really, do you need to understand how to prompt it, or do you need to have a better understanding of how to ask for the right data and how to ingest that in a non-biased way? And so we could talk about bias all day. I have a conference tomorrow that I'll be speaking about that in Dubai, actually. So in general, though, the future of this is, when does this become ingestible and usable for the common business, for those businesses that are looking to engage, or in those manufacturing business and the ERP solution and thing that we're talking about? That comes about when you have orchestration around autonomous agents or AI agents. Not talking about Copilot. Copilot is Microsoft's thing. It's an interesting thing. We'll talk about some other time. But in general, autonomous agents are going to be working in the role of an individual. So everyone, eventually, this is the goal here, is all of the technology that's combining, be it IoT, be it edge computing, be it all the server farms infrastructure that we see growing, is going to help drive these role-based, persona-based autonomous enterprise or autonomous agents. And these agents, like if you have a BA agent, like a business analyst or a project manager agent, that agent will always be invited to the meetings. It'll always have tracking to all of the different items or the artifacts that are part of that project. It's going to keep track of the action items, who said what, how it's going, like, are we on target, and give naturally some parameters around, are we doing okay with this project? And so not only do you maybe not need coordinators anymore, but you can actually have a very great project management team running tons of other projects, yet these agents are helping keep it all on track. And so there's massive wins there that many small businesses don't have now. Many large businesses don't document very well in general. And so it kind of combines the best of both worlds. And seeing how companies that are cloud focused first, or cloud first companies, versus your traditional enterprise companies that are very still much on-prem, or on premise, those companies are going to have a harder time working with GenAI than the cloud first companies. And the majority reason of that is because those enterprises that are on-prem have massive sets of data and data sets. Those data sets automatically, because we're all human, have ethical bias and things put into it just on accident, because we all have opinions. And every human out there, we all carry biases with us every day. And so my point, and also what we're going to be talking, or I'll be talking about tomorrow's like Dubai conference around AI ethics, is the fact that we need to go back to the basics and say, hey guys, like as an enterprise on a professional level, how are we dealing with ethics? What is it? Like, what is a bias? So we can understand. And then how, once we understand that bias, how do we remove that out of the data? Because that's the way to move forward. Because right now, with what we're all seeing and the misunderstanding of what most of this is, we're seeing a future coming along where it's going to look a lot like what we've seen with the social media outcries and the systems that we have. And in the world that we live in, some things are seen as okay or bypassed, when really we should be looking at about what is the data, how is it used, and what is the type of information or filters that we're putting on that data. And
that comes up over and over again in our conversations. I feel like this is, I mean, we've covered AI a lot, right? We've covered AI and ERP with Paul Coetser just two shows ago. And it's fascinating to see how that's going to impact like an ERP, a manufacturing, how it changes that whole dynamic when you're doing a digital transformation, for instance, or a business transformation, how that plays a role, because you were talking about autonomous agents that would be, let's say, part of a project management team, theoretically in an ERP implementation, in a digital transformation, any of those sorts of things that would really speed it up. Documentation, training material. I could just see all kinds of ways that could be used, right? That can really supplement, because it can do content creation. It can develop some code for some customizations or something like that. I can see so many potential uses for it, but it's also scary though, because those people that perform those functions, having an autonomous agent sit there beside them in the meeting, it's going to be a little disconcerting, right?
I mean, with new technology and new innovation, it takes a little bit to get used to. I mean, everybody thought you turn on the light switch originally when electricity was created, that's going to explode. And you're like, oh, you have to trust it eventually. And that's the thing is, we don't always have to think about what it is to us now. We have to understand, what are our children's children going to accept this to be as, and what does that look like for them? And we've seen with like Wikipedia and some of these other knowledge base areas, and just the internet in general, we all know, because we've lived with it, you can't trust the internet. You can't trust the data you're getting. You can't trust Wikipedia to always be correct.
Can't trust TikTok?
Because it's not. You definitely can't trust TikTok. So it seems to find out. I just heard one of our congressional people in the United States here was her people in her district were being blocked, and because TikTok was actually telling the users, you're blocked until this congressional person says that they agree with TikTok. I was like, that's over. Hold on. So there's some interesting things going on in the world of IT, in the world of apps, the world of using generative AI and some of these algorithms too. Yeah. But definitely on the ERP side, there are huge wins. There's definitely some use cases. And when we start to see those autonomous agents come in, and we see companies right now that are doing this, that I'm kind of working with on the side, that are showing how they can orchestrate this and how they can manage these things and build those sources of truth that we all want in ERP, there's some huge wins. And really, back in the day, even one of the
data too,
right?
Source of truth is data,
right?
As well.
And that was
It's not just hallucinations for the AI. It's just actual data, right? Master data management is a huge thing.
We've always wanted data, right? Like the data used to be the gold. It still is in a way, but now, as Sam was talking about, and as we're looking at even some of the stories you're talking about, with all of the infrastructure coming in, it's no longer just data, it's compute power, right? So I was just in San Antonio, Texas recently, and Microsoft's new server farm with all these GPUs that are coming in is insane in size. It's nuts. So it's like take IKEA, flush it out to like one floor. If it was like one story, and it's insanely sized. It's like the size of the Tesla factory, right? So, I mean, there's huge infrastructure coming, and it's all about compute. Who can compute the most? Who can gather the most data to build these, not just foundational models, but these world models of these AIs that are going to be driving this. And really, just to let everybody know like where that future is going. I mean, if you think about how things work, we used to have MS-DOS, and we had different programming languages, and then we had Windows, and that became an operating system. Where does data always
remember
go?
that? I'm old enough to remember that.
Exactly, right? Like, so data and development of code drives to an eventual operating system. And so how is another way that we can orchestrate these autonomous agents, these AI agents? Well, if you have your own operating system, it also makes it much easier. So, and it also makes it to where you're on their own cloud. Like if you have ServiceNow, like you guys are talking about, and they build their own service and their platform reaches to a point where it's almost like an operating system. And then you have to vie for the license for that, and you charge that per month. Like there's wins there. That company is now, vying for their own sovereignty in their own area and saying like, this is our area. This is what we control. And if you come into here, here's all the things that you get. The other thing that we miss though, by looking at these larger companies, they all have to grow. And when we see, ServiceNow or Oracle or even, so the other players moving into these other areas, well, they have to grow because they're publicly facing companies. And I think that's some of the hype that the individual public is missing, is the fact that you will always have these large companies driving towards these new gains to show that they're growing, because they need to grow 18% every year because they have stakeholders. What we don't see is it successful or not? Because we may not be seeing the true story. Because when you look at the overall of all of this, there's a market, but then is there a market, or are we actually creating the market right now? And the hype around what people are trying to tell us that we need to do is the actual market. Right. So, definitely if you want to use AI, understand your why, understand where that's coming from, understand what you want to get out of it. There are ways to do it. You can be successful with it. If you don't know, and you are mostly on-prem, or you have very antiquated data and siloed data that has not been leveraged, or you don't know how safe it is because you don't know if your other employee's uncle's brother has access to it, you have a problem.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up on time, but I wanted to do a couple things. I wanted to first give you a plug, because you've got a session coming up where you're going to be moderating a panel for solutions review. So this is great that you're in Inside Jam with us, into the doctors, and also on solutions review. But it's going to be called "Will AI Pose a Threat to the ERP Marketplace?" Very interesting. So it seems that it will. But I don't want to steal any thunder. I just wanted to say that you were going to be moderating it, and actually I will be on it, and I will be on the panel, and also Paul Coetser, who I mentioned, who is the SAP whisperer that came up with that article about the AI basically replacing ERP or obsoleting ERP, which is a very interesting topic. You also had a very interesting article that you made on LinkedIn about the autonomous enterprise, which we don't have time to get into at this time, but I think maybe we'll bring you back on if that's fine with you at a sometime later date. But it will be in the show notes, actually, your article, and I will share it separately. And there's 2 interviews that I wanted to share. Actually, I think I shared one already. The one with you and Wayne Butterfield, I think it was, right? Which is a very interesting interview. And then the other one that you mentioned, I'm going to share that one as well. And then, like I said, this will be in the show notes, the upcoming webinar that we're going to have, or a podcast with you as the moderator. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, happy to help and happy to provide perspectives. If anybody wants to connect on LinkedIn, that's really the only social platform I'm on, and I'm happy to have a following and answer any questions that are on there.
Great. Yeah, I will definitely post that too, and I will mention you in all my posts with the episode and everything like that. Pleasure to have you on, Doug. It was great.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Cheers.
Thank you very much. That was a great interview. I love that with Doug. He just blows my mind with the automation and the AI stuff. So Sam, what'd you think about that?
Yeah. So first off, I mean, anybody who's coming from inside Gen community, they are probably going to be one of the best people to follow on LinkedIn. So, make sure you guys follow. Doug definitely knows, what he's doing, and he knows his craft. So now, obviously then from my perspective, I'm always comparing different interviews. Where is everybody coming from? And we have done 5 or 6 different ones. Yes. And this is a very interesting take because I don't think we have had anybody from my understanding of Doug's background is that he's coming slightly more from the RPA background, which is, a space in itself. There is a play for RPA in the whole enterprise architecture, and he uses the term autonomous enterprise. So we'll touch on that. But before we do that, let's start in how the interview started, and I'm going to touch on some of the points. So, for example, let's say when you talk about this whole restructuring of these larger companies, the whole issue of hiring versus firing, and to be completely honest, I mean, this was slightly more emotional argument. If you look at this more from the business perspective, yes, it's not that, I mean, see, businesses are really trying to let people go, but sometimes they have to make these hard decisions because they have to see how hard it is going to be to upskill some of the employees. At this point of time, if you look at the market, upskilling employees for these AI skills is going to be really, really hard. So they have to make a lot of changes in the companies, and that's why they are doing it. And I always say this to even my own people that, think more from the business perspective in terms of what business is looking for and always upgrade your skills. So I don't think anybody should be taking any sort of fighting personally, because I am personally, and I don't know about you, Dan, I know that it hurts, but at the same time, we have to think more from the business perspective as well.
It does hurt.
Exactly.
When you get replaced by a bot, it hurts.
Exactly. But you know what? Again, bots are not going to replace. Bots are going to augment. So that's where I guess we need to have the clear line in terms of what is the capability that we are going to get from bots, what is the capability that we are going to get from AI. And in fact, I mean, see, the way this whole argument was that, you have these macro level issues, and typically these things are going to be driven by, when you look at the restructuring, they are driven by macro strategy. That is driven by business strategy. And when you talk about, so for example, he was talking about, hey, you know what? They don't know how to use these tools. That's a very micro issue. It's a very change management centric issue. That's not necessarily related to the business strategy. So these two are completely different things. And then what he's trying to argue is, then I'm going to have these autonomous agents. They are going to help these guys in upskilling. So that's where I guess, I mean, it's not necessarily connecting the dots for me in terms of how that is going to happen. These bots are great. They can do a lot of ad hoc activities. For the most part, they are probably going to be replacing the individual workers. That was the whole premise of RPA. For the most part, yes, you are going to require people as well to be able to manage those bots, but they are definitely replacing the workflow of those workers. So that's where I guess a little disconnect is for me. Change management, that issue that he was talking about, I don't think any technology is going to solve that problem, regardless of how cutting edge that technology is going to be.
I see your point. Yeah.
Exactly. I'll pause there. I mean, I don't know if you're going to have more follow-up comments, Dan.
I mean, I think that in that scenario, the RPA is very exciting. I mean, we brought up last time the invoice processing. They cut 70% of time out of the company we were talking about, Thermo Fisher Scientific. That's because of the RPA. So that's the costs, potentially people, but they could retrain them. But I think he was sort of making an argument that says, these autonomous agents are going to make things better. They're going to, be part of project management meetings, maybe speed up an implementation. I could see, because in previous sessions, we talked about, like a Deloitte adding some capability that's AI that's supposed to help with an implementation, right? that it has the potential to do that with these autonomous agents, I would think.
Yeah. So that's where I guess, look, every technology is going to have merits as long as you are using them in their boundaries. As soon as you are going to overstress their capabilities for which they are not really designed for, that's when you are going to have real issues. So for example, let's analyze the scenario. Okay. So invoice automation is a great use case for RPA. Okay. And he spoke about orchestration as well. So I'll touch on that in just a second. Okay. So when you talk about this particular use case, there could be two possibilities. Number one, if you have a lot of paper invoices and you require a lot of workers just to process those, just for data entry, that's where your RPA can really help. The other substitute for this particular problem could be that you change everything electronically, meaning you are never going to have paper invoices. Then you don't have the need for RPA. Now, depending upon what is going to be easier for your organization, in some cases, you are going to require changes from the customer workflow perspective that your customers are not as sophisticated and they cannot necessarily handle these things over an email. Then you don't have a choice. Then you have to use something like RPA to be able to replace these processes. Now, this is a great case. Now, if you overstress the capabilities of RPA and try to do, for example, we have seen crazy scenarios where people are trying to do orchestration of MRP. They are trying to build inventory processes inside RPA. That's when it's a lot overstretch the capabilities. So when he thinks orchestration, and that's where I like to divide the line, every single technology, every single vendor out there has a play in the architecture, but you should be using them for right use case. In my mind, ERP is going to be for very, very, very tight, formalized, standardized transaction processing. That's where ERP is really, really good at. Okay. Then the second category is going to be workflow automation. RPA is not necessarily good for workflow automation. And he was talking about ServiceNow as well. Workflow automation is a different category. In his case, he was talking about these GRC use cases that I'm going to have these role-based agents, which is a great idea, but you are spreading your GRC in three different places. Number one is going to be your ERP. Number two is going to be probably your data layer. Number three is going to be something like ServiceNow. And now you are saying that, you know what, I'm going to have my GRC in your RPA. Now, let me ask you a question. Which is going to be source of truth even for GRC right now? So that's going to be very confusing, right?
That's a good question. That's a good question. You're right. You need a data lake or some sort of repository of the one source of truth. But you're right. I mean, there's several different systems that might have to be an iPaaS or something, right? That feeds into a data that consolidates data.
Yeah. So overall, I guess from the transaction perspective, to be completely honest, Dan, not every single transaction is going to be as financially regulated or controlled. Okay, when your transactions are going to be financially regulated and controlled, that's where your use of security becomes very handy. And that's why you have these ironclad ERP systems, which everybody absolutely hate. But at the same time,
like they're here to stay.
Exactly. But the only reason why they are trying to protect you is because they are trying to protect you, right? From the security perspective, that's why they are so hard to use. Now, let's say if you look at RPA-centric use cases, if you are going to have all of those GRC processes, enterprise-grade security in that, then you are going to lose the flexibility. The purpose of RPA is very different. It's very simple to manage your ad hoc processes. Again, that's not the replacement for your ServiceNow. ServiceNow, in fact, may have RPA technologies underneath that they might be using for some of the ad hoc workflows, and even ERP systems are going to have that because they all have physical processes. So when you are going to have physical processes, that's where RPA technology is really, really handy. So I'll pause there, Dan, if you're going to have any follow-up comments there, or I'll keep going.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I am going to share several of his two of his podcasts. I think they're very interesting. And I'm going to share one of his article about autonomous enterprise. I didn't really get a chance to get too much into what that meant, what he meant by that. But that's tying together, I think, IoT devices and everything, which would be interesting. But I'd like to share those things, and I'd like to maybe see if we could get him back on. And I'm really looking forward to this, and so big plug for the Insight Jam session on about how AI is going to impact or have a negative impact on ERP systems.
Okay, so what would you like to cover next? Do you want me to keep going on the interview, or do you want to cover some of the questions, or what would you like to do next?
Well, there were a couple questions in the our little document there that I thought we might take a look at. Let me see. I think we did talk about. It's interesting that we talked about the Deloitte restructuring, and says, does the news speak to any particular trends in the consulting market? I mean, I would say that in some trends in the consulting market. I mean, you already brought up several, and he brought up some too. Would be that the demand from these customers for these massive projects that they fed on for so long. It's like it's coming the last feast in a way, right? Because on-premise system, they can go on and on and on. They can have teams of 25, 30 people customizing to the hilt, and building all this stuff in an on-premise system. But with the cloud, they don't do that. They can't do that, not at that scale. So it combines with the customers really being, with the economy being the way it is. And, the ERP upgrade, for example, is not top of mind for them, right? Maybe even some of this automation and AI, I got to do something, or I got to have, some sort of manufacturing project to make myself more efficient versus putting in a new ERP system, right? But what is the Big Four feast on? The Big Four feasts on ERP upgrade projects, right? Or massive projects. And, like a Rimini Street too, same thing, right? But they're more on the maintenance end of it. But I think that this restructuring of Deloitte is kind of an admission that there is maybe a sea change. And it's not just AI, right? Replacing things, or AI, or them figuring out how to work with AI. It's that customers aren't demanding near as much of their services as they were in the heady 90s and the early 2000s, right? When they all had massive, big projects to do whatever that massive system was.
Yeah, so let's analyze this from the business perspective then, right? So typically, if you look at, how any of the trends impact the business, right? So AI obviously is a massive, massive move at this point of time. And everybody's trying to make a room that, okay, nobody wants to miss that bus, I guess, right? Now, if they want to really win on these projects, which are probably going to be the most profitable, because that's where the money is moving, from the business perspective. So number one, you need the skill set, right? If you look at companies like Deloitte, they are going to require a lot of skill sets. Now, can you retrain some of these people? It's going to be really hard in my mind, okay? Now, people are upskilling them because obviously they want to make bigger paychecks, right? That's how people work. Everybody's trying to move in the direction of money. Everybody wants to make more money. So people are trying to upskill. And when you have to hire these AI skills, because right now, if you look at the market, you don't really have AI skill set in the market. You have to pay 2 or 3 times. How are you going to pay through 2 or 3 times when you are Deloitte? Okay, you have to find money somewhere. So this is where the restructuring is going to be really handy, that you have to have these skill sets, because once the infrastructure is done, then these massive projects are going to come, and especially the enterprises, they are going to invest heavily because they cannot afford to miss the bus from AI perspective. It's going to be a sea change overall from the economy perspective, from the industry perspective, and obviously the consulting companies are going to play a big role in that. So we will see the same shift across the board, especially when you look at these macroeconomic trends, right? So right now it's very uncertain. We don't know how the year is going to be. We have short-term problems, we have long-term problems. So it's a very, very, very hard problem for businesses to solve.
And it's not just a skills gap inside the SIs either. It's within companies, that kind of expertise for AI, that kinds of knowledge. And I think that they can simply do a lot of stuff on their own, do more stuff on their own, companies that they don't need help of a Deloitte or something, maybe, or at least it's perceived that way, so the people that are making the money aren't I just think that the massive projects, these are not AI, is not a massive project like a huge ERP system implementation. It's not that kind of scale, is it? And if the companies are not demanding that, then I think that their lunch, once they go to the cloud too, this is another thing. When you go to the S/4HANA, for instance, SAP they don't own the data, but they capture the data, right? They have you on a a subscription license. So you're locked in, right? That vendor lock-in becomes even more. And also they can have more services around it where they don't need SIs to do it. I think SIs kind of made their money on customizing, right? And building these huge monster on-premise systems with 40 consultants. Do you need that anymore? I think you don't. I think that's a sea change also, is that you just don't need it. And it just, the demand is not out there for it.
So it's a very interesting argument, okay? So, what you are talking about, consulting versus, your own employees, which is wonderful argument, okay? But if you look at the growth of the consulting companies have grown with the similar speed as your product industries. Every single consulting company out there is growing, and there is a reason for that, is because the fundamental problem that we have is the talent. It's for everybody, it's for companies, it's for consulting companies as well. And there is only one industry that they're really good at retaining the talent, grooming the talent, training the talent. Those are going to be your consulting companies. If the other companies were as good, then consulting industry would not exist to begin with. Okay, but that's not how the business models work. Okay, so if you look at the consulting companies, they have a role to play and they are not going anywhere, regardless of how much people are going to complain their rates or whatever, But consulting companies, so they are not being replaced. They are simply being restructured for the right skill set, because everybody is going to be needing those skill sets, and there is no way companies can find this skill set. For the most part, the consulting companies are going to be investing in the long term right now to develop those skills, and that is going to pay off for them to win these projects, because everybody is going to be needing these skill sets and they are going to be competing for the same talent.
They need to employ Elevate IQ.
Elevate IQ is just one option. There are like million consulting companies.
The best.
The best is Inside Gem and Solutions Review.
There you go. All right. Cool. I think we're getting close to time. How do you see it there? I think we're pretty close to time. I'd like to go on a little bit more, but we'll be back next week. So happy weekend, everybody. Have a great week, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much, Dan.